Yeah, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here and share thoughts. I thought that in a 6-7 minute presentation, I won't attempt to use a PowerPoint and rush through slides. So I'm just going to share 3 or 4 large ideas, and hopefully we can have a lot of discussion around them. So some of us started our careers. We decided to start a school in Ahmedabad. So we actually started and ran a school for about 6 years. And during that period, one of the things that the notion that we had was we've been strong believers in technology ourselves, but we realized, and that is my first message from our learning, which is that in any such thing that we try new, a lot of hard, detailed work has to go to make it work on the ground. And I'm going to take one other example and then come to technology. And one of them was this 25% rule. So in Eklavya school, we actually had, and this is voluntary, this was way back in 96, we voluntarily had 25% children coming from very poor families, and a lot of work has to happen to make that work. Similarly in technology, and I'm going to share 2 or 3 examples of what we do now. Incidentally, today we use this technology, we offer technology-based solutions for assessment and learning. So we focus only on these 2 areas, and I liked the first design principle that Simon mentioned, where he said, keep the learning as the focus, design for learning. And really that's the question. I'm using technology, is it actually helping me learn? And we do this today both with, the absolutely elite schools, the top schools in the country, the Srirams, the cathedrals, the step-by-steps, but also with some of the most underprivileged, both in rural areas, in slums in Delhi, and in governments. In 18 states, we're working with governments. In some projects, we use technology. In some projects, it's purely assessment. And the first learning is that, the potential is clearly there. I mean, we are great believers in technology. We are kind of really saying that without technology, you cannot have learning in the future, and we have, reasons on why we say that. It's not just an enabler. It's that if you really want every child to reach their potential, you cannot do it without technology. So on the one hand, we strongly believe that. Maybe in the questions we can discuss that later. But the other part is equally true, which is it's very important to have something that works and to be able to demonstrate outcomes. So in the last 3 or 4 years that we have this product called MindSpark, which is used both in about 80 to 90 of the top private schools, as well as in about 30 government schools, we are completely focused on making it work to our level of satisfaction and say that learning is really happening. And the principle that is being used there is that children don't learn by watching something. And if I give you an example of, suppose I showed you a very nice video on how photosynthesis happens, for example. Now, the doubt that I have as a teacher, here I want to connect to what we did in the school 5-6 years, is that what did the child do? Did they admire the graphics, the sound? Did they understand photosynthesis? Can I check whether they have understood? And the answer turns out to be a bit of each of them. There are some kids who enjoyed the graphics. There are some kids who looked out of the window. There are some kids who, learned something from that. And hence, how do I ensure that that is not, and if that actually happens, you're left with a situation which is not much better than you were there before technology, because even before technology, that is what happened. Can I use technology to really change the situation? And that brings me to 2 points. One is that of personalized learning, which has been talked about today, so I'll come to that later. But the other thing, which is really not a technology idea, but it's crucial for technology to study, and we call it the science of learning. We basically say that there is need for a new science of learning which doesn't exist today. And let me illustrate this in 1 or 2 ways. Basically, we say, let's take 2 problems. One is, say, learning of decimal numbers, decimal fractions and their manipulation, and the second is reading. We say that 50% of our children can't read in India at grade 2 level. And let me take these 2 examples. Decimal fractions, right? Every child in the world learns about decimals. And hence I have thousands of chapters and maybe hundreds of books on decimals and learning that, the principle and theory. By the same token, every single teacher in the world who's teaching maths in middle school is teaching decimals. And hence, for each of these teachers, for all these teachers, I need to have material. I'm going to step into a class, I'm going to teach decimals for 3 weeks. Do I have material that I can use which tells me, okay, these are the kind of problems students face in decimals. Some of them have this kind of difficulty. These are the attempted solutions. About 40% have difficulty understanding that when this happens, this number is more than this number, say. And these are some of the things that have worked well in this area. The answer is that not only is this not available, but even if you try to actually search for it, you will find, if you're lucky, and if the topic is certain topics, maybe there are 5 or 10 researchers in the world who have done this. Now the question is why? I have more research probably on the way to make plastic for use in a particular thing, and I'm not deriding that area. But we say that there is need for this whole science of learning, which says that this is how children learn. And one of the things that we do, which works very, very well, and it's very interesting when you get into it, is we actually have a set of diagnostic questions and games, which are also nothing but diagnostic questions put in the form of a game. For example, one of them simply starts off with the child having to look at 30 pairs of decimal numbers and say which of these is bigger, goes on to a second game, and so on. And after that, even in a group like this, a group of 40 children or so, the system actually classifies these 40 children into, in that particular case, 8 different categories, saying that this is the different, it could be a learning gap, or one of those categories is actually what we call the apparent expert. This child seems to know it. And then based on those remaining 7 categories that you're put in, the system actually takes you through different types of questions, games, and activities, at the end of which you are again given that diagnostic test to check whether the gap that you had has actually been removed or not. The beauty of all this is that it's all there in the data. You can actually check which category this child was, what he went through, and how that got fixed. Now, the two things. One is, in order to do this, I need to have these kind of categories and these kind of misconceptions for every single topic and subtopic. In fact, once we were talking about this in America, and they said, that's the problem with your approach. It means that you will have to know these details for so many topics across class levels and across types of, the level of the child. And we said, yes, as far as we can understand, we need to do that, and that is what we are trying to do. So if you have that, then you can use technology in many different ways. I mean, many of you may be aware of what we call intelligent tutoring systems, or we internally call intelligent teaching systems, which basically detect and then provide the kind of inputs that a particular child needs, and then helps that child learn. Let me move to the example on reading. So here in Delhi, we are running 2 centers. Again, we don't talk much about it. Some people visit. You're welcome to visit the centers, because it's about 3.5 months since they started. These centers, children have to pay a nominal amount. Currently, it's 60 rupees a month, and they are children from grades 1 to 8 or 9. And they come and they learn math and language. We insisted that it should be in Hindi, so they do it in Hindi. They do a small component of English, but the primary program is in Hindi. Now, here, if you look at the issue of reading, why is it that so many of our children can't read? Now, what we are finding is that reading too is merely a matter of a certain, and reading research also points to this, of extremely clear-cut pre-reading skills that children have not developed, and things that you can do to actually help them develop that. Now, the point here is that if I don't have any form of technology, if I'm only a teacher, even if I'm working with 15 or 16 children and people try it, I can actually go to each child, give them activities, get them to read, and try and determine where they are, and then try and give them the kind of remedial activity that they need. But I would emphasize on the try, because I can't do it the moment my class exceeds a certain number. Can technology help? It appears that it can. But the point is that you need to perfect it. You need to get it to a point where it's really working, and you're able to say that, yes, children have actually been able to read better in a way that you can measure independently and show. And I think that process is still on. And so one of the things, so 2 comments here I would make is, we need to go really deep and make sure these things really work and stand up to rigorous scrutiny. And therefore, as a corollary of that, not hyping it up, before that actually happens. I've talked about the science of learning and the examples here. I just want to share here that the kind of improvements that, there are 2 types of things. One of the good things about a system like this is, I will simultaneously in my class have children who are way below the grade level and others who are above the grade level. And we find that this grade level mapping happens not at the level of, it's not this child is below or above the grade level. It is this child in this topic is below the grade level. In some other topic which may be requiring a different set of skills, like we find this with geometry, for example, the child is actually performing above the grade level. and hence I use enrichments, which is like challenging the child at a higher level on those topics, while I would give remedial support for the lower topics. So this is actually possible, and then one has to follow a rigorous. So our studies show that this thing is working great on these topics. It's working great for example, the middle school, and I'm having more challenges when I go into the higher classes and these topics. And I think that for us to be able to say that this works across the board, that is the kind of work that really has to go on and has to be continuous. The last point that I want to make is about education for the poor in scale. I think the promise of technology, what it can do, is that are we talking about something which is replicable? Because more and more we find that as you go into, and I'm using the word poor because it doesn't matter whether it's a government school or a private school, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the heart of Delhi or in a remote area. Learning levels tend to be equally poor. And hence, in schools like this, can I have a model that is not dependent on a certain type of teacher and a certain type of teacher qualification? And that is the promise of technology, if this can be handled well. So here our experience has been that I need to have a person. It has to be an adult who is there for supervision. The adult need not be a teacher, and the adult need not be extensively trained on the skills that the children need, but they have to be trained on being able to respond to the known problems the children would have at that level. So that these are a set of problems. I have to train my people in a really good way that can actually make this happen. And the model here, so what we have actually doing in one of these models is in 2 of our programs now, the fees for the program or the cost of the program is linked to the actual learning improvements that are being obtained. That means that, so one of them is in the government schools of Gujarat in 20 schools. So the fees are linked to the actual learning improvements that are measured independently on a year-to-year basis. Even in these centers, the model that we are moving towards is one where there is a small fixed fee. There's a certain second fee which you pay if the child comes to the center regularly in a month. And the third and the largest fee is related to learning improvements only. So if your child does not learn, we bear the risk. This is the model we are moving towards. We aren't there yet. But that, to me, these ideas are the promise of technology. I think a lot of this can happen and will happen, but we need to separate the hype from the really solid and deep work that needs to happen to make this actually a reality. I'm going to close here. Yeah.